I was not so pleasantly surprised this weekend when I was out celebrating my birthday to see a commercial on YouTube advertising a GoFundMe for, well, it's meant to be speaking out against Asian hate in our country, but it does so in a particularly egregious way. And as such, I really felt the need to cover it. So let's roll with it. Let's start playing that commercial for you right now, and we'll go over it together.
On March 16th, 2021, 6 women were among the victims of a horrific shooting in Georgia. They were grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives. They were killed because they were Asian.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop it right there because the actress, Olivia Munn, the woman that you just saw at the beginning of that video, she just flat out lied to you, okay? The March 16th shooting that she's referring to, in which Robert Aaron Long, the gunman, went to 3 massage parlors and shot and killed 8 people, right? That son of a bitch is in jail now, thank God for that. But she told you that he did that specifically because the people that he shot was Asian. That's just a lie. There isn't an iota of evidence that even remotely suggests that that shooting had anything to do with race in terms of motivation or reason for committing it. None. Nothing, okay? Robert Aaron Long was a self-confessed sex addict. All right? He openly confessed that the reason why he went to these massage parlors was because he was struggling with guilt for his sex addiction. He was arrested attempting to flee to Florida, okay? And the Cherokee County Sheriff spokesperson says, and I quote, "There was some type of porn industry in that state, and that Long allegedly wanted to do some similar act in that location." According to Fox News, Long's former roommate came forward and said that Long was open with him about being treated for his sexual addiction. That Long told him that he went to these massage parlors for explicitly sexual activities and would suffer immense guilt or whatever after relapsing from his sex addiction. Whatever. The guy's a psychopath, either way. But, I mean, but that means, right? That means that these massage parlors were really sex parlors, right? That they were rackets for prostitution. Well, what happened when we went into Google to type that in to see what results came up? Right? I mean, granted, we messed up a little bit. It was supposed to be March 16th, sex parlor shootings. We typed in March 12th, sex parlor shootings by accident. Anyways, top story that pops up is a New York Times article, which in it makes no reference whatsoever of these businesses' affiliation with prostitution at all. Oh, okay, so was Long's roommate lying about this? Well, no, because we go over to DuckDuckGo, and if we type in the same thing over there, our top story that pops up is an article by MSN. And the article is titled, "Attacked Spas Had Been Targeted by Prostitution Stings." Okay, well, we click on that article, and then what happens? We find out that that article no longer exists. All right, it's just been taken down. So we take the title of that article and then put that into DuckDuckGo, and then what pops up? Well, another article by Yahoo News essentially covering the same thing that MSN had covered, okay? And in it, the article says that according to police records, that officers went to the businesses repeatedly in the past 10 years, which is important because it completely contradicts what Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms stated, which was that the businesses attacked were not on the radar for the police, adding that she didn't want to blame victims. Now, I get not wanting to blame the victims, okay? There is no reality in which what Robert Long did could ever be justified. That man is a psychopath, and he deserves to spend the rest of his miserable life rotting behind bars for what he did, okay? But to openly lie about the motivation involving this case is egregious on 2 levels. One, it is a complete disservice to any person out there who has suffered, who has been targeted specifically because they were Asian, specifically because of their ethnicity or their race, okay? That's number 1. Number 2 is you are denying an opportunity to have an important dialogue about something else that is negatively impacting not only Asian women, but women in general, and that is sex trafficking. The sex trafficking industry is a very real, very evil thing that has ruined and continues to ruin thousands, if not millions, of lives, okay? In 2017, the Los Angeles Times reported that the FBI was going after Southern California residents for partaking in large-scale international sex trafficking that abused and enslaved hundreds of Thai women who had been recruited for a better life, okay? The U.S. Attorney, Gregory Booker, right, he said The women did not have freedom of movement and, until they paid their bondage debts, were modern sex slaves. That they were forced to work day and night until they paid down their debts to the smugglers, debts that were often between $40,000 and $60,000. Okay? But let's move forward a little bit. In 2019, a report's put out by a group of academics entitled "Illicit Massage Parlors in Los Angeles County and New York City: Stories from Women Workers." Now, in this report, they interviewed dozens of women who had provided sex for money at these massage parlors, okay? And they found that a number of so did so, again, to pay off these outrageous debts to smugglers and to whoever else, all right? And also, to help their families overseas. But they also found that 40% of these women reported a client forced them to have sex, right? And 18% said a client hit them or physically hurt them, okay? The sex trafficking industry has made a lot of victims out of women working in these massage parlors and women just globally, really, right? I would dare to say it had the potential to make those 8 people that Robert Long killed victims before he even showed up. And that should be discussed. There should be some light thrown on that issue. That should be worked towards having an actual solution provided. Right? But Olivia Munn in this commercial, she's not doing that. She's lying about the motivation. Again, a disservice to anyone who has been legitimately targeted specifically because they're Asian. And again, it's also a disservice to all of the victims of sex trafficking out there, right? Because again, she's taking away the opportunity to have an important dialogue about that issue and how it's negatively impacting Asian women and women more generally speaking. Okay? So to Olivia Munn, you're just a piece of shit.
Boom. Roasted.
But let's keep rolling with it.
But anti-Asian violence is not new. It is part of our collective memory.
As the families in Georgia mourn and memorialize the lives of their loved ones, we remember the history of racism our community has faced. In 1875, the Page Act passes, banning Chinese women from entering the United States. It's the first federal law to limit immigration.
Sorry, so your first example is just an outright lie. Your second example is from something 146 years ago. Not off to a great start there.
In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act passes, prohibiting Asian immigrants from becoming U.S. citizens.
139 years ago.
Its discriminatory practices survive for over 80 years. In 1885, 28 Chinese Americans are lynched and murdered in Rock Springs, Wyoming.
136 years ago.
1930. Across California, hundreds of Filipino-American farm workers injured and scores killed by rioters. 1942. 120,000 Japanese Americans incarcerated in concentration camps by our own government.
Yeah, that's bad. It was also 4 generations ago.
1982. Vincent Chin, beat to death by 2 men with a baseball bat right before his wedding. Mistaken for being Japanese, accused of stealing their jobs.
I'm sorry, I gotta stop it right there again. You see what they're doing, right? Their strongest examples that they start this list off with are from instances that happened from anywhere from 146 years ago to 80 years ago, right? As soon as they start getting to more modern times, they start switching over to isolated instances of racism, right? Versus the previous examples, which had to do with, right, legislation or more broad examples of racism in which lots of people were affected. They then switch over to specific isolated instances of racism as though they're equal, and they're not. That's a false equivalent right there. And it has nothing to do with federal law or any systematic example of racism against Asians. Not in the 80s, not with the examples that they provided.
1989. 5 Vietnamese and Cambodian children killed, more than 30 wounded. Stockton, California.
In the wake of September 11, 2001, attacks against Muslims and South Asians surge. 2012, 6 Sikh Americans killed in a temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin.
Okay, another instance of isolated racism.
This past year, almost 4,000 incidents of anti-Asian violence, including murders of our elders simply walking in their own neighborhoods.
Memory is the antidote to death.
What does that even mean?
Solidarity is the answer to silence.
Also means nothing.
As activist Valerie Kaur once asked, what if this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb?
What does that even mean?
Today, we birthed something new, knowing it's up to all of us to keep each other safe and shine a light together.
Which is amazing because you managed to shine virtually no light on any of the actual discrimination that Asian Americans face in today's society. You just spoke in nonsensical platitudes the whole damn time. Who thinks they're better than you and doesn't care if you subscribe to their channel? Don Lemon, which is why you should subscribe to our channel today.